Good morning, my name is Stephen Capaldo and it is Wednesday, July 3, 2024. Thank you for joining us. Today, first of all, I believe, if my memory is correct, I believe it's the birthday of Julian Assange, who was the truth-telling journalist who was recently released. So I just wanted to wish him well, express gratitude for his release, and I hope that it didn't come at too high a price to his ability to do what he continues to do, or what he needs to continue to do, and I hope that he will just carry on and continue exposing things and telling truth the way he tried to do it and got into trouble for it. So today what I'm going to talk about is there's a doctrine that comes from somewhere. I got it off of a website. I don't actually know what the origin of the doctrine is, but it's something called the nice doctrine, and it's this idea that Jesus was always nice is basically the content of the doctrine, and I would like to apply it to this kind of transition in the way that Russia has conducted itself. Is first of all basically trying to be accommodating to certain people, to the West and NATO and such, and then more recently realizing that that's not going to do it. So they've been kind of changing their viewpoint and doing different things that have got them into trouble, the way Jesus got into trouble when he tried to do certain things. And anyway, that's sort of the basis of the nice doctrine, and sort of nice Jesus, or Jesus, actually the correct name would be Yeshua or some variation of Yeshua. Why do we keep saying Jesus? Well, I think old habits die hard, and a lot of the people that we work with, they're just used to that name, even though that it's really kind of the false Jesus of false Christianity, and the name that really we call on is the name of Yeshua, the unique expression of divinity, Son of God, whose name means God saves, or the Almighty saves, or the Most High saves. That's what that name means. So that's really the name we're calling on. But we usually use the word Jesus. But it's good to get used to the idea that that isn't really the right name, and maybe we should make some kind of transition in our thinking and usage. Anyway, I'm going to read through this passage on the nice doctrine, and then see where I can pull out some parallels and comparisons with what's going on, with Russia and its conduct of foreign policy. Jesus didn't care about being nice or tolerant, and neither should you. There is no shortage of heresies these days if you want to adopt some blasphemous, perverted, funhouse mirror reflection of Christianity. You'll find a veritable buffet of options. You can sift through all the variants and build your own little pet version of the faith. It's ice cream social Christianity. Make your own Sunday. S-U-N-D-A-E, or S-U-N-D-A-Y, as it were. And of all the heretical choices, probably the most common and possibly the most damaging is what I've come to call the nice doctrine. The propagators of the nice doctrine can be seen and heard from any time. Anytime any Christian takes any bold stance on any cultural issue, or uses harsh language of any kind, or condemns any sinful act, or fights against evil with any force of conviction at all. As soon as he or she stands and says, "This is wrong, and I will not compromise," the heretics swoop in with their trusty mantras. So basically, if you look at the history of what's happened between Russia and the West, once the Soviet Union fell, Russia did a number of things to try to be very accommodating to the West and NATO. The bottom line for them, or the place where they couldn't compromise anymore, was that they did not want NATO right on the doorstep of Russia. So that, of course, was alarming to Russia when a number of Eastern European countries joined NATO. And, of course, the stakes are very high now, with Ukraine trying to join NATO, but also we're at a time where there is the threat of nuclear war. So this is something that Russia tried to do early on, let's say in the 90s and early 2000s, is they tried to negotiate as much as possible with the West. And it's very interesting to note that the older politicians and diplomats have been trying to do this, but as they yield, as they give way to the younger generation, I think what will happen is the younger generation will be less and less willing to negotiate and to compromise with the West. They're more likely to say, no, this, we tried this. And we're even starting to see it now with the older generation, but I think especially the younger generation is going to say, no more. We tried to make nice. We tried to be the so-called nice Jesus, but that didn't work. And I think you see that with a lot of Christians too, just like I was reading in the passages, that they try everything they can just to be nice, and they'll do everything they can to avoid conflict. The problem is, it's not a good idea to breed conflict just for the sake of conflict, to fight just for the sake of fighting, to argue just to win the argument. Those things are not good. But then at the same time, you have people who will do anything they can to avoid a conflict, avoid an argument, when really there is a correct stand to be made. And why not make the stand? Well, it's because people are afraid. They want to be the nice Jesus. They don't want to be the bad guy. They don't want anybody to think that they're unfriendly, or that they don't like them. So they behave this way, and then they call it Christian. They say, well, I'm a follower of Christ. Well, no, you're a follower of really an unbalanced view of Christ, an unbalanced view of who Christ is. And of course, Jesus did have love and compassion. I mean, obviously he did. But he also was tough, and there is a certain toughness that goes with the love and compassion. It's not all sweetness all the time. It's there has to be a balance of you do sort of show compassion, but at the same time sometimes you have to be tough. And I think anyone who really feels like they're in Christ or following Christ or something like that, they have to adjust their thinking to that truth. I mean, that's part of the truth. It isn't just this kind of sicky sweet idea of being nice to people all the time. Just as it's not the idea that you're rotten to people all the time. I mean, it's balance, and really joining those two into one way of being and one way of thinking and speaking and acting, and that is really Christ-like. They insist that Jesus was a nice man and that he never would have done anything to upset people. They say that he came down from heaven to preach tolerance and acceptance, and he wouldn't have used words that might lead to hurt feelings. That's a very deceptive thing. Is that Jesus never wanted to hurt anyone's feelings. Well, there are going to be examples here. I mean, what about the money changers in the temple? I mean, using a place of worship for profit, right? They confidently sermonize about a meek, mild Messiah who was born into this earthly realm on a mission to spark a constructive dialogue. Now, see, that sounds like a typical politician, to have a constructive dialogue. Why don't we just see where we can compromise on the principles of truth? And of course, Yeshua or Jesus was categorical on this, that we're not to do that. That truth is truth, and we all really need to seek it. And sometimes we have a different view of what it is. Sometimes we have a different interpretation of what it is, or a different idea how it is to be implemented or applied. But the idea is really truth is what we're looking for. We're not looking for, we're looking for the tree of life. We're not looking for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We don't want to get into this kind of, ping pong match of, good, evil, evil, good, evil, evil, good. Really, we want to be free of this kind of never-ending circle. We want to break free of that, and we want to be in truth. We want to be in the truth of the Most High, in the truth of Christ. Very often we get caught in this this idea of false Jesus and false Christianity, and we just go back and forth and around in circles, saying that we're fighting evil and trying to be good, but really we don't understand that there is the ultimate, the absolute truth of the Most High, which is really what we are supposed to be seeking as we free ourselves of the lower level, that tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for the tree of life. The tree of life is the true one that we want. The believers in nice Jesus are usually ignorant of Scripture, but they do know that he was friends with prostitutes, and one said something about how we shouldn't get too ticked off about stuff or whatever. In their minds, he's essentially a supernatural Cheech Marin, and if you're not old enough, Cheech and Chong, they were comedy characters. that we shouldn't get too ticked off. He was friends with prostitutes. Well, he showed compassion. We're supposed to show compassion for people, right? We're supposed to love people where they're at and show compassion for them. We're not supposed to compromise truth. And it's funny. I always remember this joke. It wasn't a joke, but there was some politician who actually had a reputation for telling the truth, and then he died mysteriously. I think he was a farmer, and he died mysteriously in some kind of tractor accident. He was a profession. That was his profession. He was a farmer, and yet we were supposed to believe that he couldn't operate a tractor well enough to avoid death, right, by tractor. But apparently, I think it was this one, and he used to say that the people in Washington, the politicians in Washington, were no better than a bunch of prostitutes. And then he would say, well, as a matter of fact, I would just like to apologize to prostitutes everywhere for comparing them to the U.S. Congress. And so, of course, he is saying that type of thing. He didn't get into the good graces of the powers that shouldn't be, the evil people that run the show, the American empire, or whatever type of empire it is, the Khazarian empire, whatever you want to call it. But anyway, this is one of these things that always gets misinterpreted. He was friends with prostitutes, meaning that he condoned prostitution. This is where people go wrong. It's not that he condoned prostitution. It's that he tried to love people where they're at. This is the point. You don't compromise the principle, but you do show love and compassion for people who are in a difficult place. They're in this lower realm, this lower spiritual realm, and they don't know Christ or believe in God or whatever, and so you try to help them with that, and that was the ministry. And then this writer talks about he had posted things about LGBT. Saying, not speaking against the community as such, against gay people as such, but making the point is, no matter what you do privately, you don't go after children. So it's really sort of the idea of the militant movements, and this is the thing that people misunderstand about Russia. Russia has the reputation of being very anti-gay, and really that's of course when you have decided that someone is bad, then you're going to find everything you can to make them look bad, right? And no, the issue is not that Russia is anti-gay. The issue is that they've passed legislation to prevent political movements from targeting children. That's really the point, is no matter who you are, do what you want, and really the Shema applies. Love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Do what you want privately, but whoever you are, whatever you do, is leave children alone. And that's really the sense of the Russian legislation, and the official viewpoint is that you don't do anything to target children. And that certainly is very scriptural, very much in the text. And if you do bad things to these little ones, it's like you do them to me, right? That post prompted an especially noteworthy email from someone concerned that I'm not being Christ-like because I call people names. He said in part, "You aren't spreading Christianity when you talk like that. The whole message with Jesus was that we should be nice to people because we want them to be nice to us. That's how we can all be happy, period. It's that simple. Be nice to me, I'll be nice to you, and we'll all be happy. This is the whole message of Christianity? Really? Jesus Christ preached a truth no deeper or more complex than a slogan on a poster in a kindergarten classroom. Really, that's kind of like what it is. Really, a provocative claim, to say the least. I decided to investigate the matter, and sure enough, I found this excerpt from the Sermon on the Mount. We're best friends, like friends should be, with a great big hug and a kiss from me to you. Won't you say you love me too?" And you might remember that. This is a theme from Barney. Barney is a dinosaur, etc., etc. God help us, we've turned the Son of God into a purple dinosaur puppet. There's no way to be certain, but most theologians believe that despite popular perception, Christ looked nothing like Barney. I don't recognize this Jesus, this moderate, this pacifist, this nice guy. And I think that, Russia has really found out this lesson in the hard way, is that sometimes you do have to go to war. Sometimes you have to be prepared to do something that's going to cause you to be criticized and ostracized and called a pariah and demonized and all of this. And Russia is finding out what that's like. And I think it's a kind of a transition of their thinking, is that no, we don't want to just be nice and accommodate and work with our partners, etc., when they absolutely refuse to work with us, which has been the case with NATO in the West, just not taking the Russian viewpoint seriously, not understanding Russia, and just not willing to negotiate. And it used to be back in the day when Russia was the Soviet Union, the U.S. had many more serious people in positions of authority. They had many more serious politicians. They had many more serious diplomats and military people. They had, during that Cold War period, when the two sides at least prevented a nuclear war from happening, I'll give them credit for that, the two sides during the Cold War, the U.S. people available to negotiate with the Soviet counterparts, they were much more serious people. Now you look at the people, the president and vice president and secretary of state and defense and different cabinet ministers and the Congress and the different corporate people. You look at these people and they're just not serious people. They have a lot of money and they have a lot of control, and they bow the knee to the Israeli lobby, especially the elected politicians, the AIPAC. They bow the knee, but they're not serious people. So you cannot negotiate with people that are not serious, and this is what the Russians found out the hard way. So now it's, they've made this transition from, we're going to quit being nice Jesus, and we're going to go to the real Jesus, which is, sometimes you have to put on all that uniform, the breastplate and the helmet and the sword and all that, and you have to make war. And I would say what Russia is fighting right now, it is a physical war. Yes, there are military and there are operations and there are people who die, and it's very tragic. But they are fighting a spiritual war. They're fighting a spiritual war because Ukraine has a number of things that just really put them in the situation of being a rogue state. They have a president who has cancelled elections, so is he really the president? There's a great deal of evidence of, child trafficking and biolabs and restoration of a Nazi-type regime. After the overthrow of a legitimately elected government in 2014, that situation has just degenerated. And yet Russia has still tried to negotiate until February 2022 when they started the special operation. And I think that they learned their lesson, that this is really not just a matter of diplomacy and politics and trying to be nice to people, is that sometimes you have to just say this is just, it goes beyond that. It's something spiritual. There's a spiritual component here. There's something evil going on, and so we have to fight it. And it means, yes, we fight it in the physical realm, but we also address it in the spiritual realm. That the strategy and tactics are based on a recognition that what's happening here is spiritually, it's demonic. There's something that is the opposite of truth. It's the opposite of the Most High. It's the opposite of the real Jesus, who is a balance between, love and compassion and tough action when it's required. So I think actually this has kind of been part of a spiritual lesson or spiritual transformation for Russia, that they've made this this change in their thinking, and you can see the people support this. I mean, the people support the leadership. They support what's happening, as at the same time there's been more of a return to faith, more of a return to family, more of a return to Christ. So it's just a kind of for me as an observer of that country, it's just kind of a stunning transformation what's happened in the last 25 years, and it has not been easy, because the Soviet period was really not a glorious period of Russian history. I mean, it really didn't deliver much in terms of freedom and economic goods and stuff. Just maybe for the elite, but. So it was good that the Soviet Union went away, but then who are you? Can you go back to the way you were, before 1917? There are certain elements you keep or give up, and then how do you move forward? In the last 25 years, this is really what the Russians have been trying to figure out. And I think that we're seeing the last few years, it's kind of gelled into a country that has more economic prosperity. It's very, it's still resource dependent, but it's got more now. It's got more of a focus on family and faith. And there's a lot of political support for what the leadership is doing, and especially in this case, and how they're appealing to the West. They're resisting the West. They were trying to appeal to the West. The leadership was, but now they're resisting the West. So it's been quite a noticeable change, but it has taken, like any other real change, it's taken quite a long time to do that. So I'll just go on a little bit. Barney, the dinosaur, he's not the Jesus I read about in the Bible. I read of a strong, manly, stern, and bold Savior. Compassionate, yes. Forgiving, of course. Loving, always loving. But not particularly nice. And we get mixed up. We want to be nice, but nice is really sometimes what you don't need to be. Right? So now I'll just hit a couple of other points. Personally, I've studied the New Testament and found not a single instance of Christ calling for a dialogue with evil or seeking the middle ground on an issue. I am an absolutist, unafraid of confrontation. I see a man who did not waver or give credence to the other side. I see someone who never once avoided a dispute by saying that he'll just agree to disagree. And if you watch the political speeches, if you follow something like the United Nations Security Council, and you follow a little bit the Russian speeches, how they're laying out their positions, and how they're being attacked for it, they are really kind of alone in many ways. I mean, they've got some countries that are kind of in the background supporting them, but on this particular issue of Ukraine, they really are kind of standing alone and unique. And the United Nations, which is really at the center of all of this terrible activity that's going on, they are, looking for whatever ways they can find to condemn Russia and demonize them and call them war criminals and all this type of thing, instead of letting the truth come out about what's really going on in Ukraine. And it's an easy trap to fall into, because Russia is a big country. So you look at Russia, and then you look at Ukraine as a smaller country. So it's easy to say, well, Russia is just kind of picking on the little guy, but that's not really what's going on, because the little guy has proxies. The little guy has U.S., West, and NATO in back of it. So you don't really have to feel sorry, for the little guy. They've got plenty of support, which has helped create this problem, which has provoked a reaction now from the bear. Christians in this country sound too similar to the Golden Girls song and not enough like the Battle Hymn of the Republic. I think that's been the transition in Russia as well. Let's all get along to now. No, we have to put on that armor and fight physically, fight spiritually. There's too much thank you for being a friend and not enough lightning from his terrible swift sword. It's time we ask that question, what would Jesus do? And I think it's time we answer it truthfully. Jesus would flip tables and yell. And generally that's the course now of the Russian policy, Russian foreign policy, is the last couple of years they've been starting to flip the tables and yelling. And I think they kind of learned that lesson the hard way, but better late than never. So anyway, I'll stop there, and thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.